All right, a very good evening to you. Welcome to the Situation Room live on Mainland 98.3 FM. I want to believe you had a very beautiful weekend. Well, mine wasn't bad. I had enough time to, to rest. I'm not really the type that sleeps in the afternoon. It's always a sacrifice. No matter how tired the afternoon had been for me, I dare not sleep because once I do that, I just know that I've had to let go of whatever it is that I want to enjoy at night. So, just a good weekend. Well, today is Monday. Today is the 21st day of the 10th month of year 2024. And it's my pleasure to have you join us on the show today. My name is Oᴜᴜsᴜ Akinyode. And of course, we get to do this every Monday to Friday on Mainland 98.3 FM. 4 to 5:30, 90 straight minutes of conversation around politics, policies of government, leadership, our governance, and everything that affect our daily existence as a people, especially as we continue to demand for dividends of democracy for the people that swore to provide same for us. Every single election time, it is always a period for Nigerians to whip up every of their sentiment and go to the polls to make choices on who presides over them, who governs them, who makes law on their behalf, who are their representative at the states or the national assemblies, their local government chairman. All of these are components of every single successful democracy all around the world. However, when the people are grappling with survival under such democracy, then it leaves a lot to be desired. We'll have a conversation around the economies of the Federal Republic of Nigeria today, the largest economy in Africa, one of the largest in the world. Potentially by 2030, the government of Nigeria is having a template to having a $1 trillion economy. But all of these have so much component around this to make it a reality. Once again, it's my pleasure to have you join us on the show today. My guest is here seated. I always like it when guests come in too early, a bit early, so that you can have a conversation before you come on air. And today on the show, we're going to be looking at the dynamics of Nigeria's economy, especially as the government prepares for the Vision 2030. I'm always really careful when I use the word vision. We've had the SDGs, we've had the Millennium Development Goals, we've had long-term plans, we've had projections that are not exactly giving us what we want. But it is going to be important for us to keep having this conversation so that we know that the responsibility of government at every level primarily is to protect the lives and the properties of the people. And once the people are protected, once they feel safe and secure, then their whole existence can continue to, unravel and evolve. And that makes governance even easy. I always tell people, American democracy is not perfect. Neither is the one in India or whatever. They just have a system that works. They have institutions that work. The election in the US have started. Even though open voting have not started, mail-in vote have started. People are already casting their ballots. They are not closing down the states. They are not mobilizing 30,000 policemen. They are not shutting down the country. They are not. No, none of that is happening. And that is supposed to be the biggest country in the world. On the show today, I have a guest. Well, I've followed this conversation around the media space for a while. And I figured out why not? Intelligent, amazing conversation. It won't be a bad idea when you bring him up on the show today. Well, it's Mr. WG He is a very experienced person, over 20 years of experience in within the banking sector, and more importantly, he understands the dynamics of what a typical economy in this country should be like. He's also a director at the Plural Capital Limited. Well, today on the show, we're going to be looking at understanding the dynamics of the Nigerian economy, the $1 trillion Vision 2030 of the government. Mr. Dufua, good to have you join us on the show today. You're making your debut in the Situation Room, so it's my pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, amazing time we're going to be having on the show today, but let's just get straight up into the conversation. Yesterday night, I was watching the managing director of the TCN, the Transition Company of Nigeria, national TV, and for 30 minutes, I sat down glued and stuck on my TV, just listening to the MD, speaking with so much uncertainty, especially on the back of the consistent collapse of the national grid. It's a whole lot of problem. during the weekend, I was also researching, and I said, okay, South Africa has a population of less than 60 million people, and as we speak, they are generating almost 60,000 megawatts.
True.
And they don't even need up to that. They have 10,000 megawatt reserved to power their public infrastructures, hospitals, airports, schools, sporting centers, facilities, homes. True. And I'm wondering, if we have a country with over 230 million people, and we're managing between 4,800 megawatts and 5,000. The highest we've ever done was 5,900, and that was on the 2nd of October 2022.
True.
Now, let's get straight up into it. For every economy to thrive, power is key, especially in a fragile economy like Nigeria, where you need the small scale business to stimulate this growth. The employers of 5, employers of 10, employers of 20. Mr. Odufor, for the vision, whether at the short time in fixing the immediate problems we have, or the vision 2030 $1 trillion economy, how vital is the issue of power in this drive?
Thank you for having me once again. And it is Managing Director, Capital Plus.
Sorry, apologies.
Limited.
You're welcome.
I understand. So, for Vision 2030, it is a policy or a vision that I believe so strongly that Nigeria can attain. And sincerely, I believe so. Because of my vast experience in the financial sector, investment banking, the capital and money market, when we see policies going the right way, we know. And when we see the political will of the driver of those policies, we also know. And that is why we also have keyed into the trajectory of Mr. President to believe strongly that we are on the right path. Though a lot of pains, but without pains, there can be gains. And that's why we believe strongly that Nigerians must come together and unite at this time to help this vision succeed. And so for power is the main driver. It is connected to every sector of the economy for growth, and we cannot de-emphasize that. If you look at it strongly, Nigeria, in my own postulation, about 220 million people, about 160 million people active, from the age of 18 to like 40, quite active. The service sector it contributes about 58% of GDP presently. The agri sector too contributes about 22.6% of GDP. So if you combine these two together, we are talking of almost 80% of GDP. And so those two sectors alone, service sector, in the service sector, without power, it cannot thrive. The service sector covers the MSME line of business. That's the medium, small scale business, enterprise. And so for every one of them to thrive, you mentioned something very clearly here, that, an average business employs about 3 to 5 people. A medium one, 20 people, 30 people. And so power, as a cost unit in thriving, covers about 40 to 50% of overhead. As we speak now, in my own company, power covers almost 50%. It takes 50% of our overhead costs. Yes. So if you can reduce that to maybe 15, 20%, then we'll get more profit. More profit means we are stimulating the economy more. And by so doing, we are growing GDP. And so power is a very, very essential part of growth that we cannot neglect. I tell you, if you look at all the countries around the world, power is major. Without power, there can be growth. When there's darkness, there can be light. I'm talking of the spiritual side now. And so we need to also marry it with the business side. Every business needs power to thrive. Every business. And if we remove the cost of power, alternative power, in our running costs, there's no way everybody will thrive. And we'll be able to employ more people. And for me, I do not think that it is too difficult to achieve. even though I believe strongly that it is part of the fiscal policies of government. And, fiscal policies are long-term policies, So for power in Nigeria, because of our diversity, that's my own postulation now, because of our diversity, because of our regions, the different aspects of our regions, we can break power down. What Mr. President has done upon assumption of office was to deregulate power, to give power to states, to ensure that you can produce, generate and distribute. You understand? And that is a level playing field that Mr. President has created, for states. It's not left for states to domesticate these laws and ensure that they bring in foreign investors to come and generate power, depending on, so that each state can run at its own pace. Now, look at the North. The North is consistent of two major ingredients for power, which is those two type of technology to ensure that the North has power. Look at the South here. We have the oceans. We can build more dams. Though, like I said, these are capital-intensive projects and they are long-term projects. So, if Nigeria comes as a country to say that 15 hours of light on a daily basis cut across do not accept, power should evolve to every corner of the country. Because you have funds does not mean you have more power. It should be a right, to every Nigerian. If there's power in Lagos, there should be power in Damaturu. There should be power in Gongola. There should be power in Yola, and that's my view. But now that Mr. President has already given enabling laws to allow states to thrive and run at their own pace, we should be able to build over 30. We can hold it. We can hold it.
That's what it
That's the problem. And power lines are to build. So government over time, evidence of democracy, and that's where I also go to, the Lagos structure when Mr. And the beauty of having a master plan is also
like it's an auto drive.
That's what I'm saying. Lagos of some little master plan, and that's why Lagos is what it is today. The train lines that we have in Lagos today did not just happen with the government of Sanwo-Olu. No, it started with the master plan from the current president when he was governor, and every governor had followed. So if Nigeria as a country can build a 20-year master plan as we speak, regardless of every president that comes in, and I know that when Amechi was there, he was trying to develop rail lines. They had already started infrastructure. It had gone far. But when the next governor came in, which is Governor Wike, he didn't believe in that vision. Those infrastructure are still there today. Nobody is trying to follow up. But I feel that if there had been good succession plan and following the master plan, probably a city like Port Harcourt will have been the third after Abuja to have rail line, network. So, looking at the decadence in the energy sector, the current infrastructure that we have, do we have what it? Can we, when we generate, does this infrastructure have, that backing to be able to take what it produces? We need to look at different regions and the strengths they have, so that we can apply those strengths and get the best out of it. And the last one is insecurity, which is a major bane in the country. Insecurity too cuts across every aspect of development, and it hinders it a great deal. Look at now, you have an infrastructure, a new infrastructure, probably in a state like, let's say Borno State, where, insecurity is very prevalent. You won't even be so certain that 1 month after your infrastructure,
it will still be there.
No, not that it will still be there, to be destroyed. Except you come and be paying,
royalty,
maybe royalty,
to non-state actors,
exactly, so that you can survive as a businessman. I read in the papers about 2 months ago, Okomu Oil, which is a private-owned company listed on the exchange, the staffs were kidnapped. Over 200 million ransom was paid. They still came back and kidnapped more. And the company said they can't thrive anymore. And it thrives. So the power sector, we need a holistic reform where we can sit down and look at it, that where are we going to? And, government still has shares in most of these power companies. And so But because it's being run by the private sector, funding is the last part.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Odufor, for opening this conversation up for us today.
Yes.
But I mean, you've talked about security.
Yes.
You've talked about infrastructures. And when I was listening to the MD of Tᴜɪ̀cn yesterday, he also alluded to what you just said, that our problem is not increasing our generation, but we don't have, enough infrastructure to receive it. The fact that other companies, organizations are pulling out of the national grid means that once there's generation and nobody's picking it, it bounces back.
True.
You've also talked about insecurity, but the principal responsibility of every government is to secure the lives and the properties of the people. And I'm of the opinion that no reasonable development can happen or can be sustained in an atmosphere of hostility. You're building, they are destroying.
True.
You're building, they are destroying.
True.
People are getting loans from banks to make their farms. You are destroying the farms,
True.
killing the farmers. It's a lot of problem. And before we leave the issue of power, because you're coming in from a bigger umbrella of the economy, which is mostly investment banking. You guys do a lot of the stimulations and all of that. But how key is the commitment of government to provide power to the people? If we say we don't have enough infrastructure to receive, then why did we privatize? The idea of privatization is take this right, give us 49, take 51, bring in your FDIs, let them invest. Is it time for the government to sit down and review some of the privatization policies in the power sector before we can make any form of progress, Mr. Odufor?
Thank you for that brilliant question. When privatization came in, it was handled by the Jonathan government. And I remember Peter Side, Adedo Peter Side, was the one saddled with that responsibility to ensure that we had a smooth transition to the private sector when they bought all these national assets. But I still know that government retained a certain percentage in especially the trancos, that's the transition companies. Government retained a certain percentage. But, Goodluck Jonathan at that time had that vision that government couldn't do business and that we should let the private sector take over and handle business. But, the power sector is not child's play. You need, a huge war chest, to be able to do infrastructure for the power sector. And so what did most of those companies, what did they do? Most of them went through the banks to borrow, I tell you. So that was a number one fault at the initial stage, because government was interested in the funds they could get from that project or policy at that time. But rather, the bigger vision will have been that how will you sustain, your finances? Where will you get them from? What is your 15, 20-year plan? Immediately you take over, what kind of companies, foreign companies, how many are you bringing in? What is their pedigree? So that we will be sure of whoever we are giving these companies to, there will be a change in the next maybe 5 to 10 years. But, you get a company now, you get a backing from, maybe a guarantee from a bank now, and the bank guarantees you to help you pay about $300 million to government. And they pay, it becomes yours. Government, hands off. And so the problem, as at that initial stage, was who was the umpire to ensure that, there was sustainability and growth at the same time. NEC came into play. That was when Sam Amadi came on board. NEC came into play as a regulator, So, but regulating for customers is different from ensuring that government to, get government's plan begins to work. And so at that time, what most of those companies were bothered about was to generate income to service their loans, income for sustainability. So not much of new infrastructure is in place. And so we keep on running in circle, and that's where we still are today. There's no new infrastructure anywhere. And so once we have alternative power, even homes, companies, everybody trying to look for an alternative power solution, immediately it comes into play. That's the best example you can give. There is a vacuum, and once you can't hold power. Power cannot be stored.
It has to go somewhere.
Yes, it has to. It can't be stored. So once you generate, you must evacuate and distribute it. And that's where our challenge is. So the three major components of industries too, we need to evaluate one by one to be able to understand where we are, where we want to get to, and the timing in which we want to achieve it. So, but the truth is that we need a. The problem is that when these infrastructures were built about 20, 30 years ago, there was no provision to warehouse this gas and convert to power. There was no provision because at that time, power was sustainable. But as we speak now, there's no new development. In the last 3 to 4 administrations, or even 5, there's no new development because after 4 years, and governance in Nigeria is practically like 2 years. The third year, you are planning.
Politics.
That's the problem. So the second time too, you are planning for the next government. So there's no holistic approach to having a master plan. But the only person that I believe that has taken the bull by the horn to ensure that states begin to run at their pace is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Immediately he came on board, he made it clear that power was important to development and growth. And that's why, he went to the National Assembly. Greater State too is having that for
where a small-scale businesses, a lot of businesses are folded up.
Yes.
Barbing salon, beauty centers, fashion houses. And these are the small-scale businesses that would help to stimulate the growth of the economy. I really hope we get our power issues right because maybe apart from security, I'm not sure there's any sector in Nigeria that has gobbled as much money as the power sector has gobbled from 1999 till now. And I hope we get it right. Now let's go to another key component of what could drive that Vision 2030, which is economic policies and stable economic policies. Mr. Dufo, we can't deny the fact that in the last 15, 18 months or thereabouts, we've had a lot of questionable policies from the government, interest rates into double figure. How do I borrow money from bank with an interest rate of almost 36 or 35%? And that is not sustainable. What do you think the government can do? I understand your point of view. I think yes, we need quick fixes, but long-term plans are also very major. Talk to us about how we can balance both sides, how the government can look into the immediate needs of the people in terms of people-friendly policies, and how we can also push it on the long run. Let's start from the quick fixes.
Okay, so thank you for that too, because that is where it really affects Nigerians, and we need to speak directly to power, while we also speak to Nigerians to also have an enduring spirit too. So we must marry the two together. I tell you, we cannot speak about this government without talking about the last, because there's always a trajectory of flow. And so before now, Nigeria was in a comatose state, but people did not really know because our economy was being seriously patched.
Yeah, we had paper over cracks.
Seriously patched, and they patched it for 8 years to a point that on May 29, they couldn't patch anymore. So the government of Tinubu almost inherited the dead government, sincerely. And I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. You know that fuel subsidy was already off as at May 29 by law. By law. They didn't run it for a whole year. They submitted in the budget, it was clear that
from June,
no more subsidy. Because they knew that another government was coming on board. So at the end of their own government, there was no subsidy anymore. So when Mr. President announced it, it was more or less...
Just make the formal announcement.
It was just like that. But people felt that it was highly also insensitive, and I share their pains too. But another point is that as at the last quarter of Mr. President Buhari's tenure, 98% of our revenue
was used to service loans.
Seriously. Not interest, so not even.
You are not paying back the loans yet.
Not paying back the loan, just to service the loan. 98%.
That's crazy.
Of revenue. So it means that no capital expenditure, no growth, no GDP expansion, no funds to stimulate the economy, no purchasing power.
Everything
nothing
was
at all.
Just.
I'm telling you. So they were defending the naira heavily. We were borrowing heavily. As at the end of that government, he had borrowed about 100 trillion. And when Jonathan left, he left a loans debt of about 12 trillion. So Mr. Buhari pushed it up to about 100 trillion. And so Nigeria was almost dead. And so when Mr. President came in, I think the first thing he did, he acted out of emotions. Yes, acted out of emotions when he announced it. And I said that in various forums, I've said, the way I would have handled it could have been different. Yes, subsidy had to go. All the major three presidential candidates believed that he had to go. Most economic analysts believed he had to go because we were practically subsidizing for about 3 or 4 further countries surrounding Nigeria. For Chad, for Niger, we were practically paying for all they used. We were practically paying for all. And he felt that he had to stop. And more so, don't forget that at that time too, there was a National Assembly panel that discovered that people would bring in fake documents to receive subsidy. That for
supplies they didn't make.
They didn't even, no, for vessels that did not even come in. Vessels that did not even come. And they were collecting billions. And he felt that it had to stop. And that's why the man spoke out of emotions. But what could have been done differently was immediately you knew that subsidy had ended by law, send an MTEF to National Assembly. That's the medium-term expenditure framework. Send another one, maybe for 6 months, to the National Assembly to extend it so that, it won't be a double blow for Nigerians, because that double blow is what is still affecting Nigerians up to today. Number one, total removal of subsidy. Number two, floating of the naira. Those two were two major policies that Nigerians couldn't handle. So it could have been done, by bits. So when you talk to Nigerians and tell Nigerians that this is the roadmap, it's going to be tough. It's a journey that we have to walk through, but what we will do is that we'll stagger it in bits. So immediately you announce it to Nigerians. Nigerians are understanding people. Nigerians are resilient people if they see that they can trust you. And so what he would have done was to create subsidies too, other forms of subsidies. What kind of subsidies? Food subsidy, create transport subsidy, create healthcare subsidy, and ensure that, mother and child can have drugs and be treated for free in every general hospital. Ensure that, food cushions, is put in place in every local government, and ensure that governors adhere to it. Ensure that there's transport subsidy. Buses, they try to bring in CNG buses, but it's not fully operational because there are no charging points too. Yes, there are no charging points. How many do we have in Lagos? That's why if you see 50 CNG buses now, they are in a field parked somewhere because it doesn't use fuel, it uses compressed gas. So where are those service stations that they can drive to and refill just like so? Those things were not properly thought out. It was the cat before the horse. So, but one thing I want us to know is that Mr. President meant very well. It's a man that takes the bull by the horn. He has also gone further to put some other policies there, which is the local government autonomy policy. He is the first president that had the balls to be able to do that. He practically went to Supreme Court because he believes that governance is from your local government. That's governance at grassroots level. So as we are looking at the federal government, how many times do we put our governors to account? In the last 1 year, each state
had gotten almost double what they were getting in revenues.
Truth. In fact, their FAC allocations is almost double. So if they receive double and local government autonomy is in place, How many of us, go to our local government, ask questions or hold our governors to account? We don't do that. We look at the center at all times. And as Nigerians, we must begin to take the bull by the horn. And that's why developed countries are a little bit different in the way they think. Once they know that this is where I should look up to, you will see them at your gate as early as 7, begin to protest. And once you see that happen, you know that you have to be accountable to these people. And so for developmental strides in Nigeria, Mr. President had done quite a few things to help us achieve the $1 trillion economy. And like I said initially, I believe strongly that we can achieve it. Because as an economist, the signs are there. It only takes, that strong will, that political will
to push it through.
And you cannot do it without, like you said, short-term and long-term plans, monetary policies, fiscal policies. And both must run together on a parallel line. They must. And look at the CBN governor. Immediately he came in, his target was to fight inflation and to help create more effects. That was his target. And, he was able to achieve it. And that's why we had, that rate was increased 4 times this year. That's the MPR rate, monetary policy rate. And the target is to drive in effects and also to ensure that inflationary trends begin to come down. 27.25 for MPR as we speak, and our cash reserve ratio is at about 50%. Liquidity ratio as we speak is 30% within the asymmetric corridor of +5 -1. That's 500 basis points and minus 100 basis points, which means that foreign investors will look at it and look at Nigeria as the best investment destination. Some people will say that it's hot money because they are short-term investment. But you cannot stay in a U.S. economy that will give you 6%, while Nigeria is doing
give you
bonds, treasury bills,
bring it
19, 18, 20. So you get capital inflow, which is understandable in the short run. But if you continue to do that, there's another side of the market, which is the capital market. We have the same investors in these two markets. So once the money market is rising, fixed income market, the capital market begins to drop. And because it's dropping, it gives you an avenue to buy. You understand? So at the end of the day, it's a win-win. It's just that one is slower than one. If you buy at maybe 2 naira and you envisage that in the next 1 year, it will get to 4 naira, which is very, very sure. That's another 100% profit.
So you stick it in?
In January this year, we made about 35% profit. In January alone. In February, market started dropping because MPR was already rising. So it is a balance. Once one is going, one comes down. But at the end of the day, you begin to make good do not understand finance too well. So people might say that I'm speaking for the elites who invest. What of the common man who needs to feed? Which I also agree very well. Look at the agric sector. The agric sector, as we speak, like I said earlier, contributes about 22.6% to GDP. It's another major sector that Mr. President needs to rejig. I believe that what is our agricultural master plan? I doubt if the agric minister, yes. Though insecurity had been a problem in the last 2-3 years, our farmers couldn't go to farm. And if you don't plant for this season, you can't harvest in the next season. That's the problem. But moving beyond that, our governors too needs to become very ingenious. We have the land, we have technology. And nowadays, agriculture has transited from mechanized farming to, technological farming. You can plant on water now, vegetables, and in 3 weeks you have produce.
That greenhouse is springing up everywhere.
Thank you. So, what are our governors doing, in the south? If the north is having issues, what of the south? Is it that there's no arable land to begin to plant? I say it's a no. So, we must leave that old culture and begin to think out of the box on how to feed our people. Agro export alone is about 16.8% of GDP. It means that if we concentrate more on agriculture, we will unemployment will reduce further, we will feed ourselves, and we'll be able to export for growth. All of this stimulates spending, and once spending is stimulated, you will definitely grow your GDP. So if you look at those two, to achieve $1 trillion economy, we can also look at a few more. Look at oil and gas. We produce 1.4 million. Before Tinubu came in, we were producing 1.1. It dropped to 900,000 barrels a day at a particular point because of insecurity. But now it has stabilized to 1.4 million, and at about 1.6 million if you add condensates. But let's stick to 1.4. OPEC quota is 2 million. So you can imagine if we produce 2 million, there's enough security for us to produce 2 million. It means that we'll be netting over $1 billion every month more. And you can imagine $1 billion more. We can plan for the future, and it will increase GDP, no doubt. So Nigeria has that potential to grow. You can also look at our inflationary trend. Taking us back to our Greek, food inflation is 40.1% of aggregate inflation of about 33+%. So if you reduce food inflation to like 20%, inflation will drop to like 25-27%. And once inflation drops, that's another avenue to grow. And if we are growing, it increases GDP. You want me to go further by looking at night economy too. Still insecurity holding it down. We don't even have it in Nigeria.
As early as 8 p.m., cities are shutting down.
Yes. In some places, 4 p.m., you need to
Everybody's
go.
closed.
Everybody's closed. There are some local governments in Nigeria today that it's all grass. Nobody goes there. They operate from Abuja. Oh, yes. Because you can't even go. And when you want to go, you must have paid royalties for your people not to be.
So they know that you are coming. Yes. So they'll give you that your movement and you go back.
That's the truth. Except we want to deny it. So insecurity holds everything down. In the U.S. economy, night economy is about 6% of GDP.
That's big.
Oh, yes. In the UK, it's about 5%. And night economy employs over 1 million people. In London alone, over 1 million.
There are over 40,000 pubs scattered across London.
So you can imagine, the power of night economy. If we can have, a pilot state like Lagos, Abuja, night economy produces a lot. You can imagine everybody goes to work, you close by 6, 7.
Then you're chilled somewhere.
Exactly. Most of the supermarkets, you can buy till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., move around, you are secured. It sometimes, gives us joy when you see the rail line at around Marina side, still walking up to 12 a.m. in the morning. You are safe because you're on the rail. Yes. So what if we try as much as possible to make it work for 24 hours? But before it happens, you have to guarantee security for people. So night economy is another big economy that can help us grow GDP, if we really look into it. And the final one is the rebasing of our GDP, because it's been over 10 years that we rebased, and the last time we rebased was in 2014 during Goodluck Jonathan's period. I believe strongly too that if MBS rebases now, and for World Bank standard, it should be every 5 years. So once we rebase now, I want to believe that the last time we rebased at around from $258 billion to over 500 billion, and we became the largest economy in Africa.
Continent.
Yes. So, but as we speak now, it's South Africa, it's followed by Egypt, next to Algeria, and Nigeria is number 4. But we believe strongly that it's achievable by year 2030 if we can follow through the plan.
I must admit that I really love your positive energy.
Yes.
Now, I'm seeing some messages here. We'll have a lot of feedback on the show today. But in case you're just tuning in, you're live on Mainland 98.3 FM. And I've been speaking with Mr. Oluseyi, the general manager at the managing director, apologies again, at Capital Plus Limited.
Yes.
Now, you made mention of something, and I would love to take you back to it, which is the issue of trust. there had to be trust
Yeah.
between the governed and the government.
Yes.
You talked about the fact that Nigeria would have to take a couple of sacrifices on the long run. It could yield. Nigerians have enduring spirit. But how do you balance this, Mr. Dufour? If you're asking me to make sacrifices and you're not doing the same as a leader, we just delivered a 21 billion naira VP apartment for the vice president. Yes. We just took delivery of escalate from Mr. President and the vice president. We just took delivery of state-of-the-art world-class private jet from Mr. President. Mr. Dufour, are Nigerians asking enough or too much when we ask questions? I can make sacrifices. Yes. But we saw what happened in Argentina. When the president came in, he literally just held the country down and said, you know what? First off, I'm sizing down my cabinet from 59 to 19 or thereabout. A lot of things were changing. When the Kenyans wanted to ask, Kenyatta some questions, they said, you know what? Come here. You have to reduce your cabinet. You have to withdraw this and withdraw that.
Yes.
Why is there this level of distrust between the government and the governed? You just explained some amazing policies right now that if the government is communicating properly, yes, people could view it differently. But why do we keep having that vacuum, that level of distrust between the government and the governed? So every policy of the government is accepted negatively by the people. How can we change this real quick?
Okay, so two things there, and it's a very sensitive one. I am not in President Tinubu's cabinet.
I know, because a lot of people are sending me messages. Oh, this person is a cabinet member. No, let's keep it going.
No, I'm not in cabinet. So, but if you look at it well, I must speak on the side of Nigerians because I'm also a Nigerian and I also move within the country too. I move on the streets and I feel the pains of people. So we've spoken extensively on how we can achieve success by 2030, but people will ask you, should we die before 2030? So you will say that nobody should die, and that's why government must have a human face. And I would like to start with saying that this present government, nobody is blowing their trumpet. Mr.